Goedemiddag. Mijn naam is Julika Marijn. Welkom namens Happiness hier in de Intuition Stage. We gaan straks naar een talk luisteren van de Amerikaanse Andrea Owen. En zij schreef een boek, How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. Nou, een titel die voor zichzelf spreekt. Het is inmiddels in 17 talen vertaald. Niet in elk land kwam deze titel door de selectie heen. In Nederland kon hij gewoon blijven. En in deze talk deelt Andrea met ons haar persoonlijke worsteling met haar innerlijke criticus. En met een hele grote perfectionist die ze in zich had. En dat zijn patronen waar meerdere mensen mee worstelen. En waar misschien ook vrouwen net iets meer mee worstelen dan mannen. Ze is gecertificeerd door Brené Brown, de onderzoekster die jullie allemaal misschien wel kennen. En in deze talk deelt ze haar persoonlijke inzichten, met name om ons nieuwe kracht en veerkracht te geven. Om uiteindelijk lichter te kunnen leven. En na deze talk kun je nog even met haar napraten bij de stand van Cosmos. Dat is B4, B5. En dat is als je hier straks eruit gaat, eigenlijk meteen links tegenover de Happiness stand die in het midden is. Ik geef het woord heel graag aan Andrea Owen. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Oh, my goodness. I'm so excited to speak to you today. Yesterday, I did a different talk, and I know many of you were there for that one. And today, I'm going to talk to you about something that I am so incredibly passionate about. And I have to tell you, though, I mentioned yesterday that this is my first time not only in Holland, but my first time ever in Europe. I've never traveled. I know, right? I'm 44 years old and had never traveled outside of North America. And as a proper American woman who was raised in a culture where we have a lot of shame around sex and sexuality, where do you think the first place is that I went yesterday? The red light district, yes. I was telling all my friends about it. I'm like, I'm going to go to the Museum of Prostitution and take all the pictures. I have so many questions. And oh my gosh, it was so interesting to me. And so I am trying to raise my daughter to have, not as much shame around sex and her sexuality. And maybe we can take a lesson from all of you. But which actually brings me to how I would love to share this with you. This is a very recent picture of me and my daughter on a regular day in our kitchen, and she's 9. She's almost too big for me to carry anymore. But, these rugs are going to be the death of me. But she is so funny and so honest. And the other day, I was getting undressed in our bathroom, and she was brushing her teeth. And I was totally naked, and I said, "What do you think of my naked body?" And hoping that she would say, "Oh, Mommy, your body's beautiful. I love it." Because we try to teach our children body positivity. So there I am in all of my nakedness, and "What do you think of Mommy's naked body?" And she goes, And I was like, okay. And in that moment, truly, I could have gone down the path of beating myself up and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm 44 years old. My body does not look like it used to. Even my own daughter doesn't approve of my body. I need to start dieting and working out, and I look terrible, and all of these things, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the voices in our head. Or I could have gone down the path of having some compassion for myself. It's a funny story, and just really knowing that I'm okay. And both of those thought patterns, I am at choice. 100%, I am at choice for which direction I go when I'm faced with something challenging like that. And when I tell stories like that, and when I tell people that they're at choice with their thoughts, I hear things like, "I can get on board with that, Andrea, and I try to think positive. I try to have good vibes only. I try to say my positive affirmations and change my negative thoughts into positive ones, and it just doesn't work. I immediately go back into my negative self-talk. That afternoon, I have self-defeating thoughts. Is there something wrong with me? Am I doing something wrong? I must be doing something wrong. And I say, well, no, of course your negative thoughts come back. Of course you're having a hard time with it. Because as we know from brain science, is that neural pathways get created in our minds. Our brains are magnificent organs. And as we grow up, we have these thought patterns that get created like maps, like paths in our brains. The really good news about that is that we also know that our brains are malleable, and it's something called neuroplasticity, and we can actually change those neural pathways in our brains. Our brains were literally made for change and resilience. And so in 2012, switching gears a little bit here, I played roller derby. And it was one of those lifelong dreams that I was mildly obsessed with. And so I mustered up all the courage I had and tried out for roller derby. And by the way, this is not a picture of me playing roller derby. This is a photo by a man named Dean Bradshaw. If it were, I don't know if you can see the lady in the bottom right, that would be me, if it were a picture of me. But nonetheless, I played roller derby under the name Veronica Vane. We had derby names. And at the time, in 2012, when I played, and even today, in 2019, roller derby for women was the fastest growing sport in the world, not just in the States where I'm from, but in the world. And having played and knowing what goes on out on the track and in the culture of roller derby, what that told me is that women were hungry for their bigness. They were hungry for a place where they could step into their authentic selves, whether they were loud and aggressive, whether they went to college or not, whether they were a mother or not. Roller derby was a place that truly embraced all of us, no matter what color they were, no matter your sexual orientation, no matter what. Roller derby was a place where we could truly step in to who we are. And really, unfortunately, we live in a culture, and I believe that this is absolutely universal, where we are taught, whether it's explicitly told to us or just messaging, that we are not good enough, that we are not smart enough, that we are not good looking enough, that we are not something enough. This is not just for women too, because I know there's some men out there. This is for everybody. Raise your hand if you can fill in that blank at one time or another in your life, feeling not good enough in some way, right? Oh my gosh. It simultaneously breaks my heart to ask that question and makes me excited because I have tools for you. But yes, this is universal. This is something that we all struggle with. And when we get to that place where we can, whether you play roller derby or not, but when you get to that place where you step into the person that you really truly want to be, where you can really embrace who you are, all of your flaws, all of yourself, there absolutely is a group of people who will applaud that, right? And I'm sure that this is that group of people. Anyone who comes to the Happiness Festival, forget it. You are someone who surely embraces anyone's authenticity and who they really are. But at the same time, when we go out into the world, especially for women, when we truly embrace who we are and we step into our authenticity, many times we are met with, who does she think she is? I don't like her tone. She's too aggressive. She's too assertive. I don't like the way she dresses, right? And so when we are stepping into our most authentic self, when we are truly embracing our personal growth and our happiness, at the same time, again, especially for women, we are pushing up against cultural barriers. And I'm not saying that to jump up on my feminist soapbox, which I do like to do from time to time, but I'm saying that because when you are doing this work, when you are coming to the Happiness Festival, when you are embracing your spirituality or whatever it is, you have to do the inner work. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. I don't know if that's a saying here, but preaching to the choir, I know that this is my audience, right? You have to do the inner work. Absolutely, positively. It can change your life. I've been doing this for about 12 years now. And what I know for sure, over and over again, and this is universal, men and women, is that everyone struggles with the inner critic. It's that voice in your head that tells you shouldn't even try. Why try? You're going to fail. You're going to look stupid. The voice that compares you to other people. The voice that tells you you're not good enough. Absolutely, positively, everyone struggles with this. And what I'm here to talk to you about is 5 steps to manage your inner critic, to create more confidence and success in your life. This is a note-taking lecture, so if you brought pen and paper, I encourage you to get it out because I'm going to be teaching you these 5 steps. Okay, get it out, because I'm a big note taker too. I love to take notes. And it's fairly simple, and I'll start from the very top. Here are the 5 steps. I'll just give it away from the beginning. It is awareness, 3 different steps of action, and the 5th is accountability. And I will start from the very beginning, obviously. That would be weird if I started with step 3. Let's start with step 1, and that is awareness. You have to name it to tame it. This is your step 1. The way I like to describe this is if you, say you had a party at your house, and it's the next morning. This was a really big party, like the one that's going to happen tonight. Are y'all going to the party? Yes? No? I don't know if I can stay up that late. I'm one of those people that needs to be in bed by like 10 o'clock. But say you had a party at your house, and it was a really, really big party. It's the next morning, and you get up, and you have people coming over. Maybe it's your parents, I don't know who's important, the Queen of England, the Pope, somebody's coming over that's important. And you know you have to clean up. And so you go downstairs, and it's still fairly dark. All the blinds are closed. There's people passed out on your floor. There's bottles of beer spilled over. This is quite a party I'm describing, right? And you go into the kitchen, because you're going to start there. And what is the very first thing that you do? Do you walk into the dark and start trying to clean up? No, you turn the light on. And that is where you start. You have to know what you're working with in order to, quote unquote, clean up the mess that has happened in your kitchen. And so, oh, here we go. The way that I love to teach this is a little more simple than looking at your entire life, because that can be a little overwhelming. But let's break down the areas of your life. So I'll give you some examples. So let's maybe start with your career, your job. And basically what we're doing here is I want you to think about the things that your inner critic says to you. And I'm going to stop for a second because sometimes this can be emotional for people. This can kind of bring up a lot of stuff. For some people, it can bring up some trauma. If you grew up in a house where there was maybe some verbal abuse or just awful things that were said, which is, I know the story for many of us. And I say that because I don't want to just jump right over it and say, just do this and it's going to be fine. But I highly encourage you to do this with a trusted friend, or if you're in some kind of book club or a circle of people that you get together with, even maybe bring this to your therapist if you're stuck on things to talk about. This can be something that could probably bring up a lot of things to talk about. But the reason I say that is that if this part becomes emotional for you, just let it happen. It's neither right nor wrong. If you start crying, if you don't start crying, it really is up to you how you walk into this. But I say that just to let the experience happen as it may, all right? So areas of your life. Start with career. Maybe your inner critic has a lot to say about where you are or where you are not in your career. Perhaps your romantic relationships, whether you are attached or not, even if you are single or dating. I'm sure that negative self-talk has things to say about that. Maybe your friendships, and perhaps the past. How many of you have inner critics that like to remind you about all the times that you failed in your life before? Remember that time that you got fired from that job? Remember that time that relationship fell apart? Likes to tap you on the shoulder and remind you of that? That's very common. So the past might be an area of your life to look at. Goals, dreams, and aspirations. Oh, God. Inner critics love this. It's like fodder for the inner critic, like, ooh, that's cute that you think that you can reach that financial goal in your life. Oh, my inner critic thinks it's hilarious when I have these big goals. It's like, no. This isn't a comedy routine, inner critic. Like, this really is my goals. But my inner critic kind of thinks it's funny. Like, that's really funny that you think that you can have that big, enormous goal. So for you, your goals, dreams, and aspirations might be a really big one. I've left off one. Does anyone know? Just shout it out. What another area of your life where your inner critic gets really nasty? Louder, please. Raising kids, parenting, excellent, A+. Parenting absolutely that's mine. That's my biggest trigger. Work-life balance, whew, my inner critic has all kinds of things to say about how I don't do it right. The last one, there's one more. Does anyone know what it is? Appearance, yes. Second row, another A+. Body and appearance. For women, our body and appearance tends to be our number one shame and inner critic trigger. Wah, wah. By the way, just a quick side note. As it was mentioned, I am certified in the work of Dr. Brené Brown, and I'm sure that many of you know that name and her work around shame. And while this talk isn't about shame, it kind of is, because the inner critic and shame are like Siamese twins. What I learned in 2014 when I went to go and be certified under this work is that shame is underneath the inner critic. So the inner critic essentially is shame manifested. It is shame with words wrapped around it. And that shame, the whole shame resilience is for another talk, but this is absolutely positively the very first step in learning shame resilience, what I'm teaching you today. So just kind of put that in your back pocket. Okay, so these are the areas of your life. So I encourage you on your piece of paper maybe to just write down these areas, and then when you're at home later today or maybe tomorrow or whenever you get around to it, is to write down what it is that your inner critic says to you in these areas. And so this isn't necessarily about, I lost my train of thought there for a second. Something out there that distracted me. But this isn't necessarily, if there's an area of your life where your inner critic doesn't have a lot to say, this isn't a place where you can just make up stuff that your inner critic might say. If there's an area in your life that you've got, maybe your romantic relationships are on lockdown, your job's on lockdown, then just skip it, okay? You don't need to make something up. So step 2, this is our first action step, and this is to pay attention, okay? Because as I mentioned before, the neural pathways in your brain have been created. They've been created, and they just go along totally unconscious. And so what we need to do now that you know what your triggers are, now that you're pretty aware of when your inner critic gets chatty, that it's time to pay attention to it. So some very smart people did some research, some brain research, and I'm sure these people wear white lab coats and have clipboards and have glasses, and they came up with some really interesting statistics. And the first one is that the average person has 12 to 60,000 thoughts per day, which, I mean, I don't mean to stereotype, but I do feel like women probably are on the 60,000 thoughts per day. Is anyone else's brain like mine? I tell my husband, I have 37 browsers open at all times in my mind. There's so much information that I need to grab at all times, right? The next is that 98% are the same thoughts. The same thoughts. We're truly creatures of habit. Oh my gosh. And this is the one. I just can't be with this, y'all. 80% are negative thoughts. This is unacceptable to me. we live in a world where we have 12 to 60,000 thoughts per day, and 80% of them are negative. This blows my mind, and what this tells me is that most people live and breathe their inner critic all of the time. Their inner critic is in the driver's seat of their life. When I was very first trained as a life coach, this is back in 2007, and we sat there in the conference room and they were teaching us, they call the inner critic, the Coaches Training Institute is my alma mater, they call the inner critic the saboteur, which I find kind of funny. I'm like, you put a French name on it and like expect it to sound better than it really is. Like it's okay. But they call it the saboteur, and they taught us, a few tools on how to help and manage your inner critic. And I looked around the room and I thought, wait a minute. You mean to tell me that these thoughts in my mind, the ones that compare me to everyone else and make me feel like I shouldn't go after my goals, you mean to tell me that doesn't have to be my truth? I'm looking around the room and I'm like, is everyone listening to this? Like, does everyone? Because I was so excited about this. I went home and dug into everything I could find about how to manage this because I knew this could profoundly change my life, and it absolutely did. I threw all the money at it to be able to learn more about this. So some examples of where your inner critic might get very chatty for you to be able to pay attention when it happens. Maybe you make a mistake at work and you get reprimanded for it, and your inner critic tells you how stupid you are, how could you have done something, you look so unprofessional in front of everyone, so-and-so could have done a better job, how are you going to show your face in the morning? You get the picture. Or maybe you forgot to pick up your kid at school, maybe it was a half day and you didn't know, and the school was calling, but you didn't know, and then the teacher drove. Not that I have any personal experience with this example or anything, but right, we talked about parenting and how that can be a big trigger for us. Or maybe you hear about someone's amazing vacation and you start comparing yourself to other people. Those are just some examples of how your inner critic can pop into your life. So you can start paying attention. What I want the win for you to be is that you hear your inner critic, you pay attention, and then you can do the tools that I'm about to teach you. This is not so you can completely change your negative thoughts into positive ones. 100%. I want the win to be that you close the gap. So the time that you notice your inner critic and the time that you use the tools to learn to be resilient gets very, very small. Because what usually happens is that, say you get triggered, maybe you make a mistake at work and you get reprimanded. And you feel terrible about it. Like, it feels like shit, right, to get in trouble at work. And then you go home and you decide to cancel on someone who asked you to go see them for dinner. And then maybe you lash out at your partner that night because you just don't feel good. What happens is we start to make decisions based on that place, based on that feeling of feeling not good enough and feeling terrible about ourselves. What I would like you to do instead is to notice when it happens, use the tools, and close that gap so you're only in that place maybe for a matter of minutes instead of hours or days at a time. There was a time when I have a podcast, and there was a guest that I wanted to have on who was a very big name in the personal development industry. And I invited her on my podcast, and she said yes. And she wanted an afternoon appointment, which I could do, but was very, my kids were home in the afternoon, and you never know when someone's going to have like a poop emergency or something. They were very little at the time. So I said yes against my better judgment. And the appointment was scheduled for 3 o'clock, and so a couple weeks go by. I go pick up my kids from school, and I'm home with them. We're playing in the backyard, and I get a ping on my phone, and it's from this woman, and it's 3:05, and she says, "Hi, are we still on for our Skype interview?" And I was like, oh, shit. And I'm trying to get my kids ready, and I'm throwing some food and an iPad at them and begging them, please don't bother me for 1 hour. Mommy has to do this thing. Please, nobody have a poop emergency. And I'm running to my office and getting my microphone, and the whole time I'm beating myself, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. What a rookie mistake this is. This woman probably thinks I am so stupid. Now I'm never going to be able to have a working relationship with her. And in those few minutes that I was saying all those awful things to myself, I sat down in my office chair and I said to myself, well, that just happened. Which brings me to step 3, which is your second action step, and that is to have a mantra. And I know that you all know what a mantra is, being here at the Happiness Festival. It's a short, powerful statement that you say to yourself, and you can even repeat it over and over again. And what this does, remember those neural pathways that I told you about? What you're doing is trying to create a pattern interrupter. You're interrupting that pattern of thoughts. So again, this isn't about trying to sit down and have positive self-talk. Like I could have sat down and thought, okay, I made a mistake and it's going to be fine. She and I are going to be best friends and we're going to braid each other's hair and I'm the best podcaster that ever lived on this earth. I mean, I could do that, but the bullshit meter in my head is going to be like, that's not actually true. And also, who has time for that? I don't have time to sit down and recite this entire monologue in my head of how amazing life actually is. I needed to get on with my life. And some examples of what your mantra could be are the one that I just gave you. Well, that just happened. Feel free to steal mine. I love it. I use it all the time. Another example, this is from an author, I think his name is T. Harv Eker, and cancel, cancel, thanks for sharing. That's what you're essentially telling your inner critic in that moment. Another example is, I heard that. Just a brief acknowledgement. I heard that, just 3 little words. Another example is stop. This one is very popular among my clients, and many of them say that they picture a stop sign in their mind, just a big stop sign, and just tell themselves to stop in a loving, kind way, I hope. That could be your mantra. Or, I hear you, and I'm choosing not to listen to that today. I hear you, and I'm choosing not to listen to that today. Does anyone notice a theme about these particular handful of mantras? You can just shout it out. Does anyone notice anything? No? Can you say that louder? Yes. 2 things. The acknowledgement of the inner critic, so you're noticing it, and that it's neutral. It doesn't have a positive charge. It doesn't have a negative charge. The thing with your inner critic is that it's fear. It has one job, to keep you inside of your comfort zone. That's it. That's its only job. It's trying to keep you safe. But the truth of it is that I would venture to guess all of your goals and your dreams and your aspirations, the things that you're trying to manifest, the things that you are hoping, wishing, and praying for in your meditations, those are out of your comfort zone, right? And your inner critic is probably going to have things to say about it. It's doing its job. It's trying to keep you in your comfort zone. It's trying to keep you safe. That's all it's doing. So acknowledge it. It's important. I love the one, I hear you, and I'm choosing not to listen to that today. Your inner critic is still a part of you, absolutely, positively. I want to say one more thing about this. When I do this particular exercise in small groups, and I have people share what their mantra is, many of them use one of the examples that I've given, and some of them come up with their own. And I typically have 1 or 2 people who say, I have one. And I say, okay, what is it? My mantra is, fuck you, inner critic. And I'm like, okay, I love a good badass. I love somebody who's ready to kick a boot in their, in fear. However, you've been speaking to yourself a certain way for a long, long time. You have been beating yourself up probably for many, many years. My hope is that you put down the boxing gloves for just a minute and try this instead. Try on a little bit of self-compassion. There's a quote from a woman named Carol Emery Normandy, and she says, be gentle. You are meeting parts of yourself that you've been at war with. And she's talking about this. She's talking about learning how to be kind to yourself. She's talking about how to manage your inner critic. And I see people taking pictures because it's such a beautiful quote, and I'll stand back for a second. And I love this so much because it really, truly, to me, is an invitation for you to acknowledge your inner critic, be kind to yourself, start the process of self-compassion so that you can be the best version of yourself, so that you can do all of the things that you were meant to do on this earth, follow your life purpose, do and have all of the things that you all are trying to manifest right now. There was a time when my son was 5 years old, and he was diagnosed with high-functioning autism, anxiety disorder, and sensory processing disorder. And I don't know how it is here, but in the States, in the public school system, we have something called an individualized education plan. And with these, we have meetings with the special education instructors and the school principal and the teachers, all these people. And these meetings, of course, are necessary, and they're very helpful because they're trying to create an education plan for your child so all children have a really great education that's meaningful to them. And these meetings are great, and they can also, as a parent, feel like it's a meeting where they're saying, Mrs. Owen, here are all of the ways that your child is different from the others. Here are all the ways that they might not succeed in the world, and here are all the things that you should be worried about. And by the way, here are all the things that you're failing at as a parent. And of course, that's not what the meeting is, but I think any of you who are parents, or even those of you that aren't, can understand that it feels like that. And there was this one particular difficult meeting. I think my son was in first grade at the time. We were having a really hard time, and my husband couldn't come with me to that meeting for whatever reason. And I walked away feeling like I had had the emotional crap beat out of me. And I got in my car, and I was driving, and I stopped at a stoplight, and the worry set in. You know how when you're stopped at a stoplight, or you're maybe in the shower or washing dishes, when time kind of slows down for a little bit? Sometimes those can be really amazing moments of creativity where you get all your best ideas. And sometimes those can be moments where your inner critic creeps in. It's like, I have some things that I want to share with you in this quiet moment that you're having. And that's what it was for me in that moment. And I started worrying about him and thinking, is he ever going to be at a place where he can have normal friendships? When he's older, is he going to even be able to be in a romantic relationship successfully? I haven't even done all of the research that I should be doing and reaching out to all of the resources that I've been given. I haven't even done one of those 5Ks to raise money for research for autism. I don't even have one of those autism stickers on the back of my car. What kind of mother am I? And just beating myself up over feeling like I had failed enormously as a parent because of this one meeting that we had. That meeting was maybe 45 minutes, and I went down this path, and the light turned green. And I mean, how long are we at a stoplight? I know sometimes it can feel like 7 years, but we're maybe at a stoplight for a minute or two, and the light turned green, and it sort of woke me up, and I thought to myself, well, that just happened, and I'm doing the best that I can. That was my next thought. I'm doing the best that I can. Because at that time, I had been doing this work for a very long time, and I had gotten to the point where I knew that my biggest trigger was parenting. I absolutely knew it. So that was step one. Step two was that I was paying attention. I was paying attention enough to know that this only had to last for maybe a few minutes, and I caught myself and said my mantra. And at that time, I was at a place where I felt well enough to, and believed myself when I said, and I'm doing the absolute best that I can. And so step 4 is in your last action step, and that is to course correct. And again, this is not about turning your thoughts around into positive ones. This can absolutely be about, maybe you need to unfollow someone on social media that you're constantly comparing yourself to and then feel crappy about it. Maybe you need to change the subject when people are talking about how hard it is to make money in the new career that you're in. Or I had a client once who, she went on a trip with a bunch of her friends every spring to the beaches. And she said, every year with these women, we start a group text and we start talking about dieting. And we start talking about how we're going to lose weight for this trip, and I'm so tired of it. And I said, why don't you say something? You could say, hey, I think we all look amazing in our bathing suits, and I want to talk about how much fun we're going to have and all the excursions we're going to go on. I love you all too much to be having this conversation. What do you think? So it's things like that, just interrupting the pattern of things that are going on around you. Maybe it's unfollowing someone on social media, changing the subject when things are feeling negative. Or maybe I have this one thing that happened. Oh my gosh, I'm not even going to say who it was because you probably know who it is. But there's someone famous in the personal development world, and she and I share a literary agent. And so I don't know if this is a saying out here, but 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, it's sort of like everyone's connected by just 1 degree. And so she posted on social media, this was many years ago when I was first starting out as a coach. She was posted that she was going to the UK to go on a talk. And so I'm like, oh, she's an international speaker. And my kids were babies at the time, and I went down that path of comparing my career to hers and thought, I'm never going to be able to have a career like hers. I'm never going to be able to travel internationally. I did, by the way. I'm never going to be able to, she probably makes $1 million an hour, like making up all these stories about her. I don't know this woman. She was a stranger to me. But, raise your hand if you've ever made up stories about someone else's life, right? Whether they're celebrities or your friends, we make up stories about other people, and then from those stories that we just made up, we make up stories about our own life. That's what I was doing. Like success is a pizza or something, and once all the pieces are handed out, that's it. There's none left for anyone. That's what my brain was doing. I also made up that she had all the pizza. She was like hoarding the pizza over there, and there were no slices left for me. So in that moment, I had my laptop open. This was maybe 30 seconds I had made up all of these stories in my head. And so I said my mantra, well, that just happened, and I closed my laptop, and I walked away from it. And actually, that one was so bad that I called my friend and said, you won't believe what just happened. I went down this rabbit hole, this inner critic rabbit hole, and was comparing myself to so-and-so, which actually brings me to my very last step. But first, I want to tell you that I wish that this were just do these steps tonight, and you're good forever. You're welcome. Congratulations. No, actually, this is about repeating the steps over and over and over again. I still do these. I've been doing this for 12 years, and I still repeat these steps. And I can assure you that this has professionally and personally changed my life, and it has the capability to do that for you too. Your best life. People ask me all the time, if you just had one thing to tell people, what would it be about how to change their life? And I actually have 2. I can't choose between the 2. It is knowing what your values are and honoring those, and starting with the conversation that you have with yourself. That is absolutely, if I only had 2 things to tell you on how to change your life, know your values and know how to manage your negative self-talk, and repeat that over and over and over again. And so step 5, which is our last step, is accountability. This can look like a couple of different things. This can look like perhaps you have a trusted friend. Remember that example I gave you with my client and the text exchange she was having with her girlfriends? Maybe you have either a group of friends or maybe just one best friend that you can have this conversation with, and maybe do this work with him or her. And you tell that person, hey, if you ever hear me speaking badly about myself, can you let me know lovingly? Because a lot of times what goes on in our heads sometimes comes out of our mouth, and you can do that for each other. And another way to do this, as you know, you've probably heard a lot in personal development that who you spend your time with is very important. It is, but also who you share your goals and your hopes and your dreams with is even more important. And who you share your struggles and your challenges, I believe, is the most important. And we choose those people very, very carefully. That is not for everyone. When I was very first starting out in this industry, we had 2 babies. The economy in the United States was just starting to come back up from it being very terrible in around 2008. And it was hard. I was trying to build a business, and it was very, very challenging. And there was one particular hard day, and my husband came home from work, and I was face down on the couch like this. And he came home, he's like, tough day today? Like, yeah, it was hard, and I was crying, and I was telling him how difficult it was, and I couldn't find childcare that was responsible enough that I trusted with my children, and I was having a really hard time, just so afraid to get started in this work and to put myself out there. I was terrified to do it, and just feeling very, very overwhelmed being a working mother and having 2 very small children at the time. My son was 3, and my daughter was 1 when I officially launched my business. And I'll never forget it. Oh, he means well. But he leaned against the wall, and he was eating carrots or celery or something very crunchy, and he's crunching, and he's watching me as I'm crying on the couch, and he says, why don't you just quit and just come back when the kids are older, when they're in school? You could just do that. That seems so much easier, right? He was a helper. Raise your hand if you have a partner who's a helper and likes to give you advice when you don't really need the advice, when you just need someone to listen, right? Oh, our helpers, they mean well. They really, really do. And in that moment, I wanted to tell him to shut up, but I didn't. We don't say that in our house. But I remember feeling so defeated. And I didn't say this at the time, but years later and much marriage counseling later, and we've learned how to talk to each other and how to communicate so much better, what I could have said, and this is what I would love for you to take with you to say to the people in your life, the people that you share your challenges with, especially if they are helpers, like my husband, God bless him, is this. I could have said, I am so grateful that you want to help me and that you love me enough to want to be my biggest support system. And in these moments, when I'm crying face down on the couch and telling you about how hard it is to build this business, what I would love the most from you and how I would feel so loved and supported is for you to say this. And you fill in the blank with whatever it is that you need. Sometimes we just need to be seen and heard in our darkest moments. Sometimes we need a hug. Sometimes we just don't need that person to say anything, just except to look us in the face and know that they're there for us. Sometimes we need a pep talk. Sometimes we do need advice, but you could tell that person, if I need advice, I will surely come to you. You are the very first person that I'm going to ask. But wouldn't it be great if we had like an owner's manual that is like all the directions on how, like, here is how to love and support me. It's in a book. You're welcome. Please read it. But we don't have that, unfortunately. We don't have owner's manuals that tell people how to love and support us. So it's up to us. Because here's the thing. What he said to me in that moment, and he was trying to help, he really was trying to give me a solution, was what my inner critic was saying to me. My inner critic was saying, you should probably just quit. This is too hard. You're going to fail at this. You don't have enough help. You're not smart enough. You're not experienced enough. So when the people in our lives are saying the same thing that our inner critic tells us, it's up to us to let them know in a very, very kind and compassionate way. And my hope, I have 2 things. My hope is that you understand that you have the power to manage your negative self-talk, to recreate the neural pathways, and to change your life. And my second thing is, which is indirectly related, is that you understand how immensely, immensely powerful you all are. We are amazing human beings, these creatures with these brains that, again, I will remind you, were built for resilience and built for change. And I hope that you can take that with you today. Thank you so, so much for your time.